This is Standing Watch. And now, Evangelist Norbert Link.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to our Standing Watch program. The most recent terror attacks in Belgium have again confirmed the conviction of many believing that the Western world is unable, incapable of dealing with radical Islam. And Angela Merkel and President Obama are at the forefront of criticism, especially in regards to their politics pertaining to the migrant crisis, pertaining to Syria, pertaining to ISIS, and pertaining to Iran. And many observers feel that the situation in the Middle East will get worse, not better, which in turn will lead to a further enlargement of the migrant crisis and more terrorist attacks in Europe, also in the United States. As a consequence, we already are seeing the rise of popularity of anti-migrant politicians and parties in Europe, including Germany, including the Netherlands, including Belgium and France, but also in the United States. Now, I'd like to read to you from an article which the Daily Mail wrote on March 22, 2016. In fact, it was an article written by Piers Morgan, and you might recall him as one of the judges of America Has Talent and also the CNN moderator. And that is what he had to say about the terrorist attack in Belgium, which of course was perpetrated by ISIS. How many more? That's all I could think this morning as news broke of yet another ISIS terror attack, this time in Brussels. How many more innocent men, women and children are going to be blown to pieces by these murderous bastards? How many more airports, train stations, sports stadiums, restaurants and concert halls will be obliterated in a hail of suicide bombs and bullets? How many more world leaders will wring their hands on national television afterwards and spout pointless platitudes about the poor, brave victims and heroic emergency services? The inherent problem which causes it, chaotic, war-torn instability in the Middle East, is getting worse, not better. Just as the financial and military resource of the enemy is growing greater, not reducing. Yet just as the world is crying out for strong, decisive leadership, there is none. America has a happy President Obama, a man whose infamous leading from behind philosophy to foreign policy has been partially responsible for the war in Syria, raging uncontrollably for 5 years, allowing fundamentalism to ferment. Obama has zero interest in doing anything tangible to really deal with ISIS. Europe, meanwhile, is splintering at the seams, ravaged by an unprecedented migration crisis that nobody seems to have a clue how to handle. German Chancellor Angela Merkel's decision to let 1 million migrants into its country is already seen to be an utter disaster. Britain, surely a target anytime soon, is on red alert. But its warning politicians and warring politicians are too distracted by the upcoming EU referendum in June to pay anything more than lame lip services to terrorism. So nobody seems to be doing anything concrete to stop ISIS. And the indifference of President Obama is just appalling. When in Cuba, he spoke less than a minute regarding the attack in Brussels during a press conference, and then he went out with his new buddy, Mr. Castro, to a baseball game, laughing, smiling, participating in the wave. What a shameful, absolutely shameful picture of the leader of the United States of America. So no wonder that the world has no respect anymore for the United States. Now, the New York Times actually agreed with Mr. Piers Morgan in an article dated March 22, and the New York Times is most certainly not a conservative paper. They wrote, "It is not working. President Obama's slow but steady strategy to defeat the Islamic State is doing nothing to dent the charismatic appeal of the militant group, disrupt its propaganda, or prevent it from killing Europeans. Since the Paris attack, Obama has insisted that an anti-Islamic State coalition with European and other allies is getting the job done. But the president does not say when victory will come against these forces he declined to identify. He doesn't even want to call them radical Islam. And time counts. His approach looks like capitulation," the New York Times wrote. Now, how bad is it in the Middle East? The Daily Mail published this article on March 18 about a strategy expert predicting that the turbulence in the Middle East will continue and indeed worsen unless or until the West is willing to commit stabilization forces to the region. He calculates that an army of the order of magnitude of 450,000 men would be necessary to have any chance of success. It seems foolish, the article goes on to say, to dismiss this warning out of hand. The threat posed by mass population movement, migrant crisis, is huge. 77 million Turks will have the right to travel all the way to Calais, France, unhindered. The entire Middle East is in a ferment, and it is impossible to see any reason why peace should be restored anytime soon. The principal charge against Europeans' leaders today is that none of them has begun to come clean with us about the enormity of the challenge. But you see, let's not forget Iran in this mess and the terrible deal which was made by Mr. Obama and others, including Europeans, with Iran. The Telegraph wrote on March 12 that Barack Obama's ill-advised nuclear deal with Iran has kick-started a new arms race. There is now a genuine risk that Saudi Arabia and its allies will become involved in a dangerous military confrontation with Iran, saying that Mr. Obama is going to be responsible for more wars in the Middle East because of that terrible deal. The article goes on to say, Iran's decision to test-fire 2 ballistic missiles, emblazoned with the legend "Israel must be wiped out" in Hebrew, is not the sort of reassuring conduct one would expect from a country that claims it wants a better relations with the outside world. Only a few weeks ago, naive enthusiasts of President Obama's nuclear deal claimed that gains were made by so-called moderates in Iran's recent elections. What they fail to appreciate is that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the country's uncompromising supreme leader and guardian of Iran's Islamic Revolution, personally vetted all of the candidates. Thus, only those with impeccable revolutionary credentials were allowed to stand. So much for Iran's new spirit of reform. The fear now among pro-Western Arab leaders is that Iran will embark on a military build-up funded by the estimated $150 billion Tehran is set to receive as a result of the sanctions being lifted. Washington no doubt believes there is no harm in Tehran building missiles that can strike at the heart of Europe. The Europeans know that they cannot rely any longer on Mr. Obama and the United States of America. They know that they have to do something to prevent a nuclear war breaking out pertaining to Europe. You know, it has been pointed out that this deal which was made between Iran and the United States and others was probably the worst deal America has ever made in its history. But God says very clearly in His Word that the leaders of the Western world, especially the United States of America, Canada, and Great Britain, are blind. They have been blinded to the truth. I'd like to quote to you from Isaiah chapter 56, verses 10 to 11, which talks about modern America and the United Kingdom and Canada and other English-speaking nations. His watchmen are blind. They are all ignorant. They are all dumb dogs. They cannot bark, sleeping, lying down, loving to slumber. They are shepherds who cannot understand. Talking about the political and spiritual leaders of our countries. God says they don't understand. They cannot even see the signs of the time. But you see, my friends, it's not just the leaders. It's the entire nation. Or I could say the entire nations. I found this article by Deutsche Welle very interesting, which was published on March 6, saying this. The country, mainly talking about the United States, the country seems rotten, like a once mighty tree that is leaning precariously. It remains to be seen if it can weather the gathering storm or will come crashing down. This terminology is very interesting because that's exactly what the Bible says about the modern nations of the United Kingdom and the United States of America, amongst others. Words like rottenness, words like sickness, describing the nations, not just the leadership, also the people, the vast majority of the people. Isaiah chapter 1, verses 5 to 6 say this. The whole head is sick. Now that would be the leadership. From the sole of the feet, now that talks about everyone, even to the head. There is no soundness in it. And also Isaiah chapter 5, verse 24, saying this. Their root will be as rottenness. And then he gives the explanation as to why that is. Why are we in such a situation, in such a state where we are helpless to deal with these terrorists, radical Islam, ISIS, Iran, other enemies? Here is what God tells us, why he is not helping us. Because they have rejected the law of the Lord of hosts and despised the word of the Holy One of Israel. That's the reason why we have the problems we are having. How many really are interested in listening to God, to his word, and to do what he tells us? I'm afraid not too many. My friends, we have prepared a booklet, and I haven't offered it that many times before. You might be surprised when I refer to this booklet now, but I tell you that this has everything to do with the topic of the program today, with terrorist attacks which will increase, with a terrible situation in the Middle East, with what Europe is going to do in the near future. This booklet is titled The Book of Zechariah, Prophecies for Today. The Book of Zechariah. Did you know that the Old Testament book of Zechariah contains prophecies for us today? Most people don't understand this. Most people think that these peculiar visions, which are being explained or rather written down in that book, have to do with the times of Zechariah. Nothing could be further from the truth. These are prophecies for us today, but you need to understand what they mean. And they will tell you exactly what Europe is going to do. They will tell you exactly the fate of Jerusalem. They will tell you exactly about the downfall of the United States of America, the United Kingdom, but also that they will rise again in the future. You need to understand these prophecies if you really want to know what these events which are taking place in the world today have to mean, and what God is telling you, what importance you can ascribe to them. So thank you very much for listening. This is Norbert Link for the Standing Watch program.
Standing Watch is a presentation by The Church of the Eternal God, P.O. Box 270519, San Diego, California 92198. More information is also available at our website, eternalgod.org.